Lisa Fletcher, and you're in The Stream. Today, is the internet a sexist place? We look at the abuse and harassment faced by women in the online world. Filling in for Malika as digital producer is Anousheh Hossain, writer, commentator, and women's rights advocate. Anousheh, I've been on TweetDeck since yesterday when we posted this topic, and it's been going crazy.
We're having a really heated debate right now in our online community, and there's a huge debate between, who is reflecting who, online versus reality. I'm going to be pulling up our tweets during the show. If you at home want to join us, please tweet me using the hashtag @AJStream.
And joining us in the studio is Alice Marwick, assistant professor at Fordham University here in the U.S. She studies online social behavior and was previously a postdoctoral researcher in the social media collective at Microsoft Research. Alice, welcome to The Stream.
It's great to be here.
Great to have you. Our show is all about community, and there are a number of ways you can be a part of it. One way is Google+. Just add The Stream to your Google+ circles, and you can be in The Stream. For now, though, here are some hashtags we're following. Simply having a username that looks female means, according to one study, that you're 25 times more likely to experience online harassment. Some have even described it as a gang rape-like mentality when referring to the extreme levels of misogyny on the internet. While many feminist bloggers receive hate emails threatening them with rape and murder, hashtags like "reason to beat your girlfriend" trend on Twitter. Abusive comments and images like the ones you're seeing on your screen have become expected by some female users due to the public nature of various social media platforms. In certain instances of harassment, a woman's personal information like her home address, telephone numbers, and even government ID data has been posted online. Forums where women are attacked attract hundreds of comments, and their traffic rates increase dramatically as they gain popularity. So is it simply the anonymity that allows people, often whom are men, to take such liberties, or is it an extension of offline sentiment? Joining us from London via Skype is Helen Lewis, deputy editor at the New Statesman, which is a British political magazine. She's not only reported on the abuse and intimidation that women experience online, but she's been the target of it. Helen, welcome to The Stream.
Hello.
Alice, I want to start with you. It seems that this type of aggressive, intimidating behavior online is actually increasing. Is it? And if it is, why?
Well, I think it's important to understand that the internet doesn't cause sexism and misogyny. It's just an outgrowth of our larger society. So what often looks like an increase tends to be because the internet makes things more transparent. In previous times, a man might have made a sexist comment to one of his buddies, but you wouldn't have been able to see it. It would have been behind closed doors. It would have been in a small group of people. But once those types of sentiments are put out on the internet, anyone can view them, and it can be really disturbing to see these things right in front of you for the world to see.
So, Helen, we see these kinds of things online, things that Alice was just saying, you generally wouldn't say anymore face to face. But you see it online, it's disturbing, it's sometimes violent, it's very aggressive. Is this who people really are, or is this some sort of weird phenomenon that's happening in an online circumstance?
I think there's an interesting fact that some people don't realise quite that they're publishing, and I think that's the problem that we have here often, is that, like you say, it's something that you would say to a friend. People don't realise that that is there for everyone to see forever.
So is it reflecting actual sentiments toward women?
Well, I think so, probably. In a lot of cases it is. Obviously, there's a case that sometimes you get people egging each other on. What we see sometimes in some of the comments threads is that the first few comments will be fine, then somebody will say something that's a bit off topic, then people kind of try and outdo each other. So I think that's definitely something that feeds into it as well.
I want to go over to our online community here for a second. I have a tweet from Bonnie Newman, who's saying there's no denying there's sexism online. Misogynist ideologies offline are the root. Online communities are only an expression. I also know that in our Google Hangout, let's go over to Rebecca. She has a comment for us. Here you go, Rebecca.
Well, yeah, one of the things that interests me the most is the impact that misogynist comments have on women online. For instance, a lot of the harassment that I see happening towards women and towards feminist voices in particular seems to be focused on silencing them. So I'd be interested in hearing from others if my experiences are universal and if that kind of misogynistic feedback that women get is actually preventing them from speaking out more.
Alice, is that the desired effect?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the big worry, is that this will have a chilling effect, and it'll make women, especially young women, less likely to speak about their experiences online. And one of the interesting things that we found is there are certain social spheres, there are certain spheres online where you have a great deal of women, and you don't tend to have these comments, but they tend to be confined to very traditionally feminine spheres. So blogging about parenting, blogging about fashion, blogging about food. There tends to be a sort of culture of niceness. It's when women start talking about politics, sexism, feminism, current events. That's when I think you start getting the most hateful comments. And I think it's a fear of women expressing themselves in what have traditionally been male spaces. It really serves a gatekeeping function. I think the overall function is to silence women's voices, but what we need to do is make sure that that doesn't happen and that we encourage women to continue expressing themselves online, even against this hateful backlash.
Yeah. You know, let's go to a tweet, actually. I was going to say something, but I want to get our community in on this because there's so many people wanting to talk.
Here, from Eddie Anikian. When men come from societies that disrespect women, it's hard to expect them to change simply because they're online. And it's interesting because this tweet kind of goes to the effect of what you were saying. It's the same way women had to fight for the spheres that we have that weren't traditionally assigned to us in real life. We're going to have to fight, some would say we're going to have to fight those same battles online. I want to go over to Google Hangout now. We have David waiting for us. David?
Hello there. I guess the question that I have that's related to some of the things that people have been saying already is when I see some of the most extreme misogyny online, I find myself wondering as I wander around in the real world if all the people I'm passing, if all the men I'm passing actually spend their days thinking about these sorts of things, if they're really as misogynistic as men appear online, or if there's the anonymity of the internet and the sort of reinforcement that people get for misogyny online brings that out, and that in fact the people who are the loudest are not necessarily representative.
Alice, do you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, I think that is a very good point. I think that there certainly is an extent to which the anonymity afforded by the internet and the distance between the person that you're talking about and yourself allows you to sort of make these very crude comments to people that you wouldn't necessarily do in face-to-face situations.
You know, I want to get to something that was quite controversial. Recently, a 14-year-old girl posted on Reddit that she thought that she was raped, and then she recounted the details of her experience. And she was shown little sympathy and brutally verbally abused online. I want to read some of the responses that were posted. One person said, "Why the hell are people thinking someone who is 14 has the mentality of an 8-year-old? On average these days, girls lose their virginities at that age. 14-year-olds aren't innocent little babies that don't know what they're doing." And then another person wrote, "She's partying, smoking pot, and I will assume, if this isn't a troll, that she didn't lose her virginity at this party. No, I'm not saying that she deserved it, but she's coming very close to ruining a boy's life because of sex that she regretted." And now, in contrast, after this stuff all got posted online, Reddit then asked for men who had raped to share their experiences. And while some women lashed out, others actually showed sympathy or appreciation for what they called being able to get in the head of their attacker. And here's some of what this guy posted. Let me pull it up here. He had this long post, but part of it he says, "The great knights were the ones who squirmed," referring to the girls that he was attacking. "One who didn't want to give in. I'd have to shush them down and try to work on them slowly enough so they didn't know what was going on until it was pretty much already happening. I'm a muscular guy, over 6 feet, around 200 pounds, and most of these girls may have been 125 to 130. Really tiny and easy to pin down." Alice, why these incredibly different responses?
Oh, God, that is so disgusting. Like, just listening to that, it's so hard to hear. I think that there's two things going on here. I think the first thing is that we see online what we call homophily, which is this idea that birds of a feather flock together, and often it causes a sort of push towards the extreme end of the spectrum. So if you have a bunch of left-wing bloggers or a bunch of right-wing bloggers who are only speaking to each other, they'll tend to sort of push each other to the more extreme ends of the spectrum. I think what you see here is somebody who's being reinforced by the community, who's expressing something that he probably, he definitely feels this way. Like, it's clear this is a rapist. This is somebody who doesn't respect women, but he's in an environment where he can express that, and that people are sort of supporting his expression of that. The second thing is that online misogyny is, women have had spaces to talk about gender and the way the gender has changed for about 200 years, since the Seneca Convention in the United States. There has not been as much public discussion about the way that masculinity has changed or the way that gender roles affect men. So I think that a lot of this misogyny is coming from a place of fear and a place of entitlement, and from a place where men don't have spaces to talk about these types of things, and they're discouraged in our culture from talking about gender. So I think that some of these extreme expressions of misogyny are really coming from this place of fear and anger. I'm not saying they're justified in any way. They're not. But I think we do have to start understanding why there is this resent of hatred in women if we ever want to solve the problem.
Helen, respond for me, if you will, to the things that I just read, and then also answer the question whether or not Reddit should have posted this thread for rapists to begin with.
Well, I think what you see with that thread is the fact that it isn't as simple as only bad people do bad things. And actually what came across in a lot of what the men were saying was they didn't realize that what they were doing was rape because they didn't see themselves as rapists. They had that construction which you see so much throughout media of, rapists are people who attack you in the street. It's not somebody you know. And so I thought that was actually quite a valuable thread to happen, because it caused a lot of realization that, that rapists aren't just horrible men. It can be the guy who goes too far at a party. And that was really important. And that goes to what David's saying, which is the fact that, you say, are these people walking around constantly? You can have terrible misogynist thoughts you express online and probably be very nice to all the women in your life. That there are these dichotomies within people that we haven't really got to grips with, and the internet allows that kind of fluidity of identity that shows, that shows up these discrepancies in how people think. As for whether or not Reddit should have allowed it, I don't think Reddit is the most constructive place for those discussions to happen. But equally well, I don't think that legislating them is the answer.
I want to expand upon the theme that you brought up about creating safe environments for women to speak up and bring up these issues. I want to go over to our Google Hangout. Mariana?
Hi there.
Hi, Mariana.
So I was thinking about a few things here, and I want to say that where I've experienced sexism the most has been on Twitter, because that's where I do most of my social networking. And I've been every now and then I get concerned about the reward system for certain tweets, because people earn stars, and to them, that means that they did really well in whatever weird little thing they said. But then I've also, I've come across men making statements that make me feel very uncomfortable, because they go so far as to push the idea that we owe them certain kinds of sexual behavior. And every now and then, because of the screen name I use, they'll churn it around into something sexual. And I've also witnessed women objectifying themselves because of this reward system, so that they can get these stars from the male readers on Twitter. And what that's caused me to ask is, well, where are we supposed to go from here as women if this is something that bothers us so much? And what is our call to action if our opinions on forums fail to change certain behavior or thought patterns in sexist people?
Alice?
Well, I hate to say it, but I think it's just a matter of persistence. I think that both men and women need to speak up when they see behavior online that they find reprehensible. I mean, there are certain communities online, Boing Boing, Metafilter, there's a lot of others where there's great intelligent discussions, because the moderators of those forums or the creators of those communities don't allow for sexist behavior. The problem with spaces like Twitter or Facebook is they're really diverse, they're really broad, they can be used for a variety of different things, and you don't have sort of singular moderators or singular people with content standards going in and, just removing comments that are offensive or sort of policing what people are saying. But I think that this needs to be a collective effort. I think if it's up to every individual woman to say, I don't like this behavior, you're making me uncomfortable, you're being sexist, then she's always going to get shouted down. But if this is something that we start doing together collectively, if it becomes a situation in which people know that these kinds of comments are no longer acceptable online. I mean, this is a very sort of optimistic, idealistic viewpoint, but I think that the collective action is really the only way that this is going to change in the long term.
True, but I do think that the conversation at some point has to be women have to stop bashing women. I mean, I'm reminded of Jessica Valenti, the blogger who had lunch with other bloggers and Bill Clinton. And then, you know, a law professor, Ann Althouse, devoted an entire article on her website to Jessica's breasts and how Jessica was posing and how if she would have had on a blue dress and a beret, you know, a la Monica Lewinsky, it would have been even better. And it's like, what role do women play, and what is a woman's responsibility in stopping perpetuating these stereotypes?
I mean, that's a great question. I mean, I think that we need to stop thinking this is like a men versus women thing, or men are the only sexist. There's a lot of men who have very progressive gender attitudes, and there's a lot of women who have very retrograde gender standards. Like you said, people who would not identify as feminists, people who want to police other women's behavior. In fact, often women are the gatekeepers of sexism, in that they're trying to sort of pay the most attention to what other women are doing, and they're sort of subtly policing them. I think that, you know, this is sort of how insidious sexism and misogyny are. It's rooted in every single part of our culture, to the point where a lot of women have internalized these attitudes. So this really, again, speaks to the fact that this is a large structural problem, and it's not going to be changed by a single law or a single campaign. It's something that really has to happen on many different levels of society.
I want to pick up on that theme that you just mentioned. I have a tweet here from W. Greenhouse. Probation moderation works too. If someone doesn't respond to being put in a penalty box, they're clearly a troll. I also have a tweet here from Sing Alleluia. If you know who is abusing you, don't just shrug your shoulders. Get after them and prosecute. I want to head over to our Google Hangout real quick. Rachel Niblett. Hi, Rachel.
One of the things that I would like to bring up is that I'm a member of a lot of gaming communities. I'm a member of Reddit. I was there when these threads were being posted. And a lot of the defense in, favor of allowing things like rapists to speak out was that it was free speech. And my question is, do you believe that free speech not only means that they can say what they want, but that we are forced to also give these people a platform to say things, and to say sexist things in particular?
Helen, you want to pick that up?
Yeah, that is absolutely the key question of this debate. My attitude to it has always been that you have the right to say anything you want within legal boundaries and threats and things like that, but that nobody has to listen to you. And actually, people talk a lot about free speech. Someone who commented on one of my blogs gave it a fantastic example of the way that works in reverse, which is if you're a female blogger and you say something and loads of people try and shout you down, where is your free speech in that situation? You are the one who's being silenced. So it very much cuts both ways. It's not as simple as simply saying, I should be allowed to say everything I want, otherwise you're impinging my free speech.
Yeah, there was a Canadian psychologist who wrote about these posts on Reddit. He thought it was incredibly dangerous and irresponsible, and he said this gives a rapist the audience that they want. Mm-hmm. It allows them to horrify people, which is part of the excitement for them. And he said it's dangerous because it's actually inciting this sort of behavior. So when Jezebel came out and posted that Reddit is not responsible for triggering something, is it possible that actually they are, if they're inciting this kind of aggressive behavior?
Well, I mean, legally they're not responsible for it under the safe harbor provision of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. This is in the U.S. I know the most about U.S. copyright laws, but that doesn't mean they don't have a moral responsibility to police the type of content that is being perpetrated through their system. And I think this is where we get into the self-policing of communities. There are parts of Reddit that are terrific. There are a lot of women who use Reddit. There are some great conversations that go on in that space. There's no reason why the people who want to stay there and have these great conversations should have to put up with these other kinds of discussions and things that are really hateful. And, I agree with what's been said previously. This doesn't amount to censorship. This is not about legally barring somebody from talking. This is about saying these types of comments are not welcome in this particular community. So I'm a big fan of self-policing, of communities creating standards, of community moderators getting involved, and people from within the community deciding what appropriate standards are in terms of codes of conduct.
I have a tweet here. Actually, I want to go over to our community for a second from Wimgirl. So many men feel the entitlement to space, using it, controlling it, right to it, including on the internet. So that goes to what you were saying earlier, Alice.
Yeah, and the sort of ironic thing in all this is that the majority of social media users tend to be women. There's more women on social network sites than there are men. There's a lot more women on sites like Tumblr than there are men. These are spaces where women often make up the majority of people. I mean, that's not necessarily 100% true in all cases, but there certainly are many internet spaces that are primarily women. So this isn't a case of men feeling that they have the right to control a community because it's all male. This really is a sense of entitlement around who has the right to speak in a space that's perceived as public. And just as there's a problem with women speaking in public space in real life, women walking alone in public at night, women having a political voice, the same types of dynamics exist on the internet.
Helen?
You see that one of your people in your Google Hangout mentioned gaming, and I write a fair bit about gaming, and that is absolutely the attitude that there is that games are for men, or they're for young men. And actually, we now see a 40-60 split in games being played by men and women, and casual games are played by millions of women. But that is the feeling, is that these women have come in and they're taking our pastime, they're taking our male space away from us. So women who write about gaming get an incredibly hostile response because they're somehow seen as ruining the fun. And I think that the same thing probably applies in other male-dominated spheres as well.
So in terms of solutions, there's obviously no easy answer, but this is complicated because it needs to be really a global solution. We're talking about the World Wide Web, so we can't have just Western values applied. Yeah. We have to consider multiculturalism. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the problem with governmental regulations is they don't tend to work at all. In the U.S. alone, there's 38 states that have laws against cyber harassment, and yet they're rarely put into practice because law enforcement doesn't have the technological know-how, they don't have the budget, and it's very difficult to tell where somebody's coming from. As you said, this is a global problem. This is something that happens all over the world. Somebody might be harassing you who's 2 continents away. And generally, people who make laws about the internet don't tend to really understand the internet, and so that sort of just compounds the problem because often these laws have unintended effects that can be quite negative. So really, again, I think this is about confronting misogyny and sexism on a structural level. And luckily we have, hundreds of years of feminist movements all over the world that are working to do that. And I think it's about increasing the visibility of these movements, about being willing to have a public discussion like we're having here about sexism, about misogyny, about oppression in all of its various forms, and really bringing that to the forefront. Because for so many years, I think feminism has been a dirty word, especially in many parts of the mass media. We're supposedly in a post-feminist world. But we live in a world where sexism is very real. Many of these online situations show that to all of us. And I think we need to start confronting this and say, if we want to move forward, we really need to start treating women as full and equal citizens.
I'm going to pause you there. We're going to continue this discussion in our online conversation. But first, we want to get to Anusha, who's got a couple other leads we're following.
Twitter is being used to track devastating flooding in the Philippines' capital of Manila. At least 9 people have been killed and thousands forced to flee their homes in some of the worst flooding in recent years. People are using the hashtag RescuePH to tweet info of those in need of help, as you can see here. Typhoon Haiku is the 3rd typhoon in less than a week to hit the Philippines. More than 50 people were killed in the previous storms. For our next lead, Obama supporters uploaded a political parody on YouTube using the global hit song Somebody That I Used to Know by the band Gautier. Let's take a quick listen.
Even the shirt that was on my back is owned by China or being arbitraged by...
The video called Obama That I Used to Know makes fun of everything from the country's high unemployment rate, the president's use of drones, his unmet vow to shut down Guantanamo, and his general promise of change. It's got about 19,000 hits on YouTube. Finally, a website offers a new way to look at the medal count from the Olympics. This is probably what you're used to seeing when people tally the medal count. China and the U.S. leading the pack with the most gold medals and total medals. But this website, medalspercapita.com, offers a different perspective. It ranks each country's medal count in relation to the size of its population, with the general result of Grenada and New Zealand coming out on top. Grenada, with a population of about 110,000, has 1 medal. By comparison, the United States has 1 medal for every 5 million people, and China for every 19 million. We're tweeting out the link so you can look in more detail. You can even look at the numbers for past Olympics. For more of the stories we're following, head to our website at stream.aljazeera.com. Lisa?
And stay with us because the post show is next at stream.aljazeera.com. And on Wednesday, can monitoring social media prevent crimes and crisis events? We'll look at what could be the future of surveillance in the European Union. And until then, we'll see you online.